The world has seen kings, empires, legends, but very few names have achieved something almost impossible. A name that became bigger than the product itself. A name so powerful, people wear it on jackets, hats, watches, posters, and dream about it before they can even drive. Ferrari. Not just a car company. A symbol. An obsession. A machine built from speed, ego, rivalry, ambition, tragedy, and pure insanity. Because the truth is, Ferrari was never supposed to exist. It was built by a stubborn Italian man who refused to compromise. A man who turned pain into power. A man who cared more about racing than comfort. A man who created beautiful machines, while becoming one of the most feared figures in motorsport history. And behind the screaming V12 engines, behind the luxury, behind the billion-dollar empire, lies a story filled with betrayal, death, war, heartbreak, and obsession. This is not just the history of a car company. This is the story of how Ferrari became the most legendary automotive brand the world has ever known. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Ferrari isn't simply driven. It's worshipped. Enzo Ferrari was born in Modena, Italy, in 1898. At the time, cars were barely more than noisy metal experiments rolling across dirt roads. Nobody looked at automobiles the way we do today. There were no supercars, no Formula One, no global automotive empires. But everything changed for young Enzo when his father took him to a race. The engines screamed, the crowd roared, the drivers looked immortal. And in that instant, Enzo Ferrari became obsessed with speed. Not luxury, not wealth, not fame, racing. That obsession would consume his entire life. But before Ferrari became Ferrari, Enzo's world completely fell apart. World War I devastated Europe. Enzo's father died. Then his brother died. And Enzo himself nearly died after becoming severely ill. The young man who dreamed of racing suddenly found himself alone. No direction, no money, no future. But sometimes the most powerful empires are born from desperation. After the war, Enzo searched desperately for work. And eventually, he found his way into the automotive industry. Not as a giant, not as a founder, as a nobody. He worked for small companies. He tested cars. He learned. He observed. And then came the company that would change his life forever. Alfa Romeo. At the time, Alfa Romeo wasn't just another car manufacturer. It represented prestige, performance, Italian engineering excellence. And Enzo quickly proved he wasn't ordinary. He raced for Alfa Romeo, then managed drivers, then built racing teams. But here's what made Enzo different. He wasn't obsessed with being the best driver. He was obsessed with building the best racing machine. That distinction would change automotive history forever. By the 1920s, Enzo created something called Scuderia Ferrari. At first, it wasn't even a car company. It was a racing team, a team that prepared and managed Alfa Romeo race cars. And slowly, the prancing horse began appearing. That iconic logo, the Cavallino Rampante, came from a World War I fighter pilot named Francesco Baracca. After Baracca died in combat, his mother suggested Enzo use the symbol for good luck. Enzo added the yellow background of Modena, and unknowingly created one of the most recognizable logos in human history. But Ferrari still didn't build Ferrari cars. Not yet. That moment was coming. And it would happen because of conflict. Because Enzo Ferrari had a problem. He hated being controlled. As tensions rose between Enzo and Alfa Romeo management, the relationship deteriorated. Eventually, Alfa forced him out. And worse, they banned him from using his own name in racing for several years. Imagine that. The man who would create Ferrari, legally forbidden from racing under the Ferrari name. Most people would have given up. Enzo became more dangerous, because now it wasn't just ambition anymore. Now it was personal. Then World War II arrived. and like millions across Europe, Enzo's world was consumed by chaos. Factories were bombed. Italy was collapsing. Resources disappeared. Ferrari's workshop was even destroyed during Allied bombings. Everything he built, gone. But Enzo Ferrari possessed something terrifying. An obsession so strong that failure only made him more determined. And in 1947, the first true Ferrari was finally born. The Ferrari 125S. A small red machine powered by a screaming V12 engine. That decision alone changed history. Because while many manufacturers focused on practical engines, Enzo wanted beauty, emotion, music. Ferrari engines weren't designed simply to move. They were designed to make people feel alive. And when the 125S finally raced, it immediately showed promise. But Enzo Ferrari understood something most companies never learn. Winning races creates legends, and legends sell cars. So Ferrari became obsessed with motorsport. Not casually interested, obsessed. Every victory mattered. Every defeat felt personal. Enzo demanded perfection. Drivers feared him. Mechanics respected him. Rivals hated him. But the results were impossible to ignore. Ferrari started winning, and then winning more. Soon, the prancing horse became synonymous with speed itself. But Ferrari's rise wasn't smooth. It was brutal, because racing in the 1950s was horrifyingly dangerous. Drivers died constantly. Cars exploded. Crashes were violent. Safety barely existed. And Enzo Ferrari developed a reputation that still divides people today. Some believed he cared more about victory than human life. Others believed he simply understood the brutal reality of racing better than anyone else. But regardless of where the truth lies, tragedy followed Ferrari everywhere. And Enzo carried enormous emotional scars. One of the darkest moments came in 1956. Enzo's son Alfredo Ferrari, known as Dino, died at just 24 years old. It shattered him. Dino had been the future, the heir, the next Ferrari. After his death, Enzo was never truly the same again. Friends noticed he became colder, more isolated, more ruthless. But strangely, Ferrari itself became even stronger, because Enzo poured his grief into the company, into racing, into immortality. By the 1960s, Ferrari had become the ultimate symbol of performance and prestige. Movie stars wanted Ferraris. Racers worshipped Ferraris. Collectors chased Ferraris. Owning one meant something. It wasn't transportation. It was status, identity, power. But then came the rivalry that transformed Ferrari forever. Ford versus Ferrari. One of the greatest business wars in automotive history. In the early 1960s, Ford wanted credibility in racing. And Henry Ford II believed buying Ferrari would instantly give Ford prestige. Negotiations began. For a moment, it looked like Ferrari might actually be sold. But during the final stages of the deal, Enzo discovered something he hated. Ford wanted control, especially over Ferrari's racing division. And that was unacceptable. To Enzo Ferrari, racing wasn't business. It was his soul. So in a legendary act of defiance, Enzo insulted Ford representatives and walked away from the deal. Henry Ford II was furious, humiliated, enraged, and he made a promise. If Ford couldn't buy Ferrari, Ford would destroy Ferrari. That promise led directly to one of the greatest racing battles ever witnessed. Le Mans. For years, Ferrari dominated the famous 24-hour race. But Ford poured unimaginable amounts of money into creating a machine capable of beating them. The result was the Ford GT40. And when the two giants finally collided, it became war, not marketing. The pressure was insane. National pride, corporate pride, personal pride. And in 1966, Ford finally defeated Ferrari at Le Mans. It was devastating. One of the most painful losses in Ferrari history. But here's what made Ferrari different. Defeat never killed the brand. It made the mythology stronger. Because Ferrari represented passion, emotion, imperfection. The company felt human. And that emotional identity became Ferrari's superpower. Over the following decades, Ferrari created some of the most legendary cars ever built. The 250 GTO, the Daytona, the Testarossa, the F40, the Enzo, the LaFerrari, each one becoming more than a machine. They became cultural icons, posters on bedroom walls, dreams for millions, and Ferrari carefully protected its exclusivity. This is something many people still don't fully understand. Ferrari doesn't simply sell cars. Ferrari sells access, exclusivity, desire. That's why the company limits production. That's why certain customers are chosen. That's why some people with unlimited money still cannot buy the Ferrari they want. Because Ferrari learned a secret that luxury brands spend decades chasing. The less available something becomes, the more powerful it feels. And Ferrari mastered that psychology better than almost anyone. But while Ferrari became a global icon, the company also faced enormous challenges. Financial struggles, internal conflicts, changing markets, competition from Lamborghini, Porsche, McLaren, and others. And speaking of Lamborghini, that rivalry began because of pure ego. Ferruccio Lamborghini originally made tractors, but he loved expensive sports cars, including Ferraris. The problem? He hated how unreliable they were. So he approached Enzo Ferrari with criticism. And Enzo basically told him to stick to tractors. That insult changed history, because Ferruccio Lamborghini decided to build his own sports car company, a rival capable of humiliating Ferrari. And just like that, another automotive legend was born from Enzo Ferrari's arrogance. That's the strange thing about Enzo. He inspired people, but he also created enemies everywhere. Yet somehow, that intensity fueled Ferrari's identity. The company wasn't polished. It wasn't corporate. It wasn't emotionally neutral. Ferrari felt alive, even flawed, and people connected deeply with that. Then came Formula One, the arena where Ferrari would cement itself as the most legendary racing team in history. No team has become more synonymous with Formula One than Ferrari. The red cars, the screaming tifosi, the passion of Italy. Ferrari wasn't just participating. Ferrari became the soul of the sport. Champions came and went, but Ferrari remained. Drivers like Niki Lauda, Michael Schumacher,
Kimi Räikkönen,
Sebastian Vettel, each carrying the enormous pressure of representing the prancing horse. And no era transformed Ferrari more than Michael Schumacher's dominance in the early 2000s. Under Schumacher, Ferrari became unstoppable. Race after race, championship after championship. The combination of Schumacher, Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, and Rory Byrne created one of the greatest dynasties in motorsport history. For millions of fans, this was peak Ferrari. Pure dominance. But even then, Ferrari remained emotional. Because unlike many corporations, Ferrari always felt tied to identity, to history, to pride, to legacy. When Enzo Ferrari died in 1988 at age 90, an era ended. But the myth became immortal. By then, Ferrari was no longer just a company. It had become an idea, a global symbol of ambition and excellence. And ironically, Enzo died just before witnessing one of Ferrari's most legendary cars, the Ferrari F40, the final Ferrari personally approved by Enzo himself. Raw, violent, uncomfortable, terrifying. The F40 wasn't built to pamper drivers. It was built to remind the world what Ferrari truly represented. Speed without compromise. And today, decades later, Ferrari occupies a place almost no brand has ever reached. Children recognize it instantly. Adults dream about it. Collectors spend tens of millions acquiring rare models. The Ferrari 250 GTO became one of the most expensive cars ever sold. Not because it's practical, not because it's comfortable, because it represents history, emotion, legend. Modern Ferrari now builds hybrid hypercars, advanced technology, massive performance numbers. But at its core, the philosophy remains surprisingly unchanged. Ferrari still sells emotion. That feeling when an engine screams past 8,000 revolutions per minute. That feeling when sunlight reflects off Rosso Corsa paint. That feeling when people stop and stare as the prancing horse passes by. Because Ferrari was never meant to be rational. Nobody needs a Ferrari. That's the point. A Ferrari exists because humans crave passion. Because deep down, people don't just want transportation. They want excitement, meaning, dreams. And Ferrari mastered the art of turning dreams into metal. But perhaps the most fascinating part of Ferrari's story is this. The company was built by a man who often seemed emotionally distant, cold, demanding, obsessive. Yet he created machines capable of making millions feel something unforgettable. That contradiction became Ferrari's identity. A company born from obsession, built through suffering, forged in competition, and immortalized through passion. Today, Ferrari is worth billions. Its logo is recognized across the planet. Its racing legacy remains unmatched, and its influence reaches far beyond cars. Fashion, movies, music, pop culture. Ferrari became bigger than the automotive industry itself. But if you strip away the money, the luxury, the prestige, the celebrity owners, the billion-dollar valuation, at the center of Ferrari's story remains one stubborn Italian man from Medina, a man who simply loved racing more than anything else. And maybe that's why Ferrari still feels different, because beneath all the engineering and performance, there's still a heartbeat inside the machine, a soul. And every time a Ferrari engine comes to life, the world remembers. Some companies manufacture products. Ferrari manufactures desire. And that is why Ferrari became legendary. But the deeper you go into Ferrari's history, the more unbelievable the story becomes. Because Ferrari wasn't built through comfort. It was built through war, pressure, rivalries, fear, and obsession so extreme that it consumed everyone around Enzo Ferrari. To truly understand Ferrari, you have to understand Italy itself. The country was rebuilding after devastation. Factories were broken. Economies were collapsing. People struggled to survive. And somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, Enzo Ferrari wanted to build racing cars. Not family vehicles. Not practical transportation. Racing cars. To many people, it sounded insane. Who spends money building high-performance machines when the world is trying to recover from war? But Enzo Ferrari wasn't thinking like everyone else. He believed racing represented human progress, courage, innovation, national pride, and most importantly, immortality. Because Enzo understood something terrifyingly well. People eventually die. Legends do not. That mentality became the foundation of Ferrari. And from the very beginning, Enzo ruled Ferrari almost like a kingdom. Employees feared disappointing him. Drivers feared his criticism. Mechanics feared his silence. He rarely celebrated openly, rarely showed softness, rarely admitted weakness. But when it came to racing, nobody matched his intensity. Every tiny detail mattered. The engine sound, the weight balance, the aerodynamics, the driver psychology, the strategy, everything. And this relentless obsession slowly transformed Ferrari into a machine that operated differently from other companies. Ferrari wasn't just engineering. It was theater, emotion, drama. Even Ferrari's flaws became part of the mythology. Because unlike sterile corporations, Ferrari felt human, sometimes brilliant, sometimes chaotic, sometimes emotional, sometimes ruthless. And fans loved that unpredictability. During the 1950s, Ferrari dominated races across Europe. Mille Miglia, Targa Florio, Le Mans. Ferrari became synonymous with courage and danger. Back then, racing drivers were treated almost like gladiators. They drove at horrifying speeds with almost no safety protection. One mistake meant death, and Ferrari pushed relentlessly for victory anyway. This created enormous controversy around Enzo Ferrari. Some critics accused him of caring more about winning than protecting drivers. Others argued that Enzo simply accepted the brutal reality of motorsport during that era. But regardless of perspective, death became deeply connected to Ferrari's racing history, and Enzo carried those tragedies heavily. One of the most devastating incidents occurred during the 1957 Mille Miglia. A Ferrari crashed at high speed, killing both the driver and spectators. The accident shocked Italy. Suddenly, Ferrari faced public outrage, lawsuits, investigations, political pressure. For a moment, it looked like the Ferrari empire might collapse. But Enzo refused to surrender, and this became a repeating pattern throughout Ferrari history. Every time people believed Ferrari was finished, it somehow survived. Stronger, more legendary, more feared. That resilience slowly transformed Ferrari into something larger than business. It became mythology. Meanwhile, Ferrari road cars were evolving rapidly. And this is where Ferrari did something genius. The company used racing technology to make ordinary wealthy people feel connected to motorsport. Buying a Ferrari suddenly felt like buying a piece of victory itself. The cars became emotional objects. Beautiful curves, powerful engines, aggressive styling. Ferraris looked fast even when standing still. And unlike many luxury brands, Ferrari never focused mainly on comfort. Even today, Ferraris prioritize emotion, the steering feel, the engine note, the sensation of speed, because Ferrari believes driving should feel unforgettable. And that philosophy created some of the greatest automotive masterpieces ever built. The Ferrari 250 series became legendary, especially the 250 GTO. Now here's what makes the 250 GTO fascinating. When it was originally sold in the 1960s, it wasn't considered the priceless collector icon it is today. It was simply an incredibly advanced racing machine. But decades later, collectors realized something. The 250 GTO represented pure Ferrari DNA. Beauty, performance, rarity, racing pedigree, and eventually, it became one of the most expensive cars on Earth. Some examples sold for over $70 million. Think about that. A machine originally built for racing became more valuable than private jets, mansions, and yachts. That's the power of Ferrari mythology. But Ferrari's story isn't only about engineering. It's also about psychology. Because Ferrari mastered desire better than almost any company in history. Most businesses try to sell to everyone. Ferrari does the opposite. Scarcity became part of the brand strategy. Limited production, strict customer relationships, exclusive ownership culture. Ferrari understood a powerful truth. Human beings value what feels difficult to obtain. And Ferrari weaponized that psychology brilliantly. That's why celebrities, athletes, billionaires, and collectors constantly chase limited Ferrari models. Owning one isn't only about transportation. It signals status, access, importance. But exclusivity also created criticism. Some people accused Ferrari of arrogance. Others believed Ferrari manipulated customers intentionally. And honestly, both perspectives contain some truth. Because Ferrari has always protected its image aggressively. The company even became famous for sending legal warnings to owners who modified Ferraris in ways the brand disliked. Imagine spending millions on a car and still being told how you should use it. That sounds absurd. Yet strangely, it made Ferrari feel even more exclusive. Because Ferrari wasn't acting like a desperate seller. Ferrari acted like a luxury kingdom guarding its reputation. and people became even more obsessed. Then came one of the most important periods in automotive history, the supercar wars. During the 1970s and 1980s, competition exploded. Lamborghini, Porsche, Lotus,
McLaren.
every company wanted to build the fastest and most exciting machines on Earth. And Ferrari responded by creating icons. The Berlinetta Boxer, the Testarossa, the F40, especially the Testarossa. Thanks to movies, television, and pop culture, the Testarossa became a symbol of wealth and excess during the 1980s. This dramatic side strakes, this wide stance, its aggressive presence. It looked futuristic, and suddenly Ferrari became bigger than racing. It became entertainment,
Music videos.
Hollywood films.
Celebrity culture.
Ferrari entered the global imagination. But while the world saw glamour, life inside Ferrari remained intense. Enzo Ferrari continued demanding excellence. Even in old age, he remained deeply involved in the company. And perhaps no car represents his philosophy better than the F40. Released in 1987, twin-turbocharged, lightweight, brutal,
No unnecessary luxury.
no electronic babysitters.
No compromise.
The F40 terrified drivers. And that was exactly the point. It reminded the world that Ferrari wasn't supposed to feel safe. It was supposed to feel alive. Many enthusiasts still consider the F40 the greatest Ferrari ever built. Not because it's the fastest, but because it captures raw emotion better than almost any car in history. And then, Enzo Ferrari died. August 14, 1988. An entire era ended. Italy mourned. The automotive world paused. Because whether people loved him or hated him, everyone understood one thing. Enzo Ferrari changed history forever. But something extraordinary happened after his death. Ferrari didn't fade away. It evolved. The myth became even larger. Through the 1990s, Ferrari experienced turbulence. Formula One frustrations, business pressures, competition, and then came the man who would restore Ferrari dominance. Michael Schumacher. What happened next became legendary. Schumacher joined Ferrari in 1996. At the time, Ferrari was iconic, but inconsistent. The team had passion, history, massive fan support, but championships kept slipping away. Then Schumacher arrived with ruthless determination. Alongside Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, and Rory Byrne, Ferrari built one of the greatest dynasties in sports history. And the transformation was unbelievable. Ferrari became unstoppable. Race after race, season after season, the red cars dominated Formula One. For younger generations, Schumacher became Ferrari itself. The helmet, the red suit, the victories, the celebrations. And during those years, Ferrari's global popularity exploded even further. Children who had never watched racing suddenly knew the Ferrari logo. That's how powerful the brand had become. But Ferrari's success also created pressure. Because once the world expects greatness from you, every mistake feels massive. Every failed season becomes a crisis. Every strategic error becomes international news. That's the burden of being Ferrari. No other team in Formula One carries emotional expectations quite like it. And Ferrari fans, known as the Tifosi, are among the most passionate sports fans on Earth. When Ferrari wins, Italy celebrates. When Ferrari loses, millions feel heartbroken. That emotional intensity makes Ferrari unique. It feels less like supporting a company, and more like supporting a religion. Meanwhile, Ferrari road cars entered a new technological era. The Enzo Ferrari hypercar arrived in the early 2000s. Named after the founder himself, carbon fiber construction, Formula One-inspired technology, insane performance. The Enzo showed the world that Ferrari could combine racing innovation with road-going madness. Then came the LaFerrari. Even the name sounded dramatic. Not a Ferrari. The Ferrari. Hybrid technology. Extreme aerodynamics. massive horsepower. And once again, Ferrari proved something important. The company never wanted to simply follow trends. Ferrari wanted to define them. Today, Ferrari stands at a fascinating crossroads. The automotive world is changing rapidly. Electric vehicles, autonomous technology, environmental regulations. Many traditional sports car companies face identity crises. But Ferrari continues adapting while protecting its emotional core. And that's incredibly difficult. Because Ferrari doesn't sell practicality. It sells feeling. The sound of an engine echoing through a tunnel. The tension before acceleration. The emotion of driving something beautiful. Those sensations are difficult to replace. Yet Ferrari keeps evolving. Even entering the SUV market with the Purosangue. A move that shocked purists. Some fans argued Ferrari was abandoning tradition. Others saw it as necessary evolution. But regardless of opinion, Ferrari once again dominated headlines. Because Ferrari understands attention. And perhaps that's one of the company's greatest strengths. It knows how to stay culturally relevant. Even after nearly a century, that's incredibly rare. Most companies eventually become ordinary. Ferrari never did. And maybe the reason is simple. Ferrari was never built around logic. It was built around emotion. People don't dream about spreadsheets. They dream about roaring engines. Victory, beauty, passion. Ferrari turned those emotions into a business empire. And somehow, despite changing generations, changing technology, and changing markets, the magic still works. Because somewhere deep inside human psychology, Ferrari represents something primal. The desire to go faster. The desire to stand out. The desire to experience something extraordinary. That's why children still stop and stare when a Ferrari drives past. That's why adults still hang Ferrari posters in garages and offices. That's why collectors spend fortunes chasing rare models. Ferrari became more than transportation. It became aspiration itself. And perhaps the most astonishing part of the story is this. The company began with one emotionally damaged man obsessed with racing. A man who endured war, loss, betrayal, criticism, tragedy, and unimaginable pressure. Yet through all of it, he created machines that made people dream. That's Ferrari. Not perfection, passion, not comfort, emotion, not transportation, legend. And nearly a century after Enzo Ferrari first chased his impossible vision, the prancing horse still runs, still feared, still desired, still worshipped. Because some companies build products. Ferrari built immortality. And the strange thing is, the deeper you study Ferrari, the more the company starts to resemble something closer to a dynasty than a manufacturer. Because almost every major era of Ferrari history feels like a different chapter in an epic war. The early years were about survival. The middle years were about domination. The modern years became about preserving mythology in a rapidly changing world. And through every decade, Ferrari faced enemies. Some external, some internal. But perhaps the greatest enemy Ferrari ever faced was expectation itself. Because once a company becomes legendary, the world stops judging it normally. People don't compare Ferrari to ordinary brands. They compare Ferrari to perfection. And perfection is impossible. Yet Ferrari keeps chasing it anyway. That endless chase became the emotional fuel behind the entire brand. You can see it in the engineering. Ferrari engineers obsess over tiny details most people would never notice. The steering response, the throttle calibration, the weight distribution, the exhaust tone, the emotional sensation of acceleration. Because Ferrari understands something many modern companies forgot. People remember how something makes them feel, not just what it does. That philosophy explains why Ferrari owners often describe their cars emotionally rather than logically. They don't simply talk about horsepower. They talk about drama, character, presence, emotion. A Ferrari doesn't quietly arrive. It announces itself. And that emotional theater became central to Ferrari culture. Even Ferrari dealerships feel different from ordinary luxury showrooms. There's an atmosphere, a sense that you're entering a world built around aspiration. And Ferrari carefully cultivated that atmosphere for decades. The company became incredibly selective. Certain limited edition Ferraris weren't available simply because someone had money. You needed history with the brand, relationships, status, loyalty. That strategy sounds risky. Most companies desperately chase customers. Ferrari sometimes appears to challenge them instead. Yet somehow, demand only grew stronger. And psychologically, that makes sense. Humans naturally desire things that feel exclusive. Ferrari transformed ownership into achievement. And that achievement carried emotional power. But Ferrari's journey through the late 20th century wasn't only glamorous. There were moments when the company genuinely struggled. Economic downturns threatened luxury markets. Competition intensified. Technology evolved rapidly. And throughout all of it, Ferrari faced a difficult balancing act. How do you modernize without losing soul? That question haunted nearly every major Ferrari decision. Because Ferrari couldn't simply become another technology company. If the cars lost emotional intensity, the entire identity would collapse. That fear explains why Ferrari remained deeply connected to racing. Motorsport acted like the company's heartbeat. Every victory reinforced the mythology. Every defeat created pressure. And Formula One became Ferrari's greatest stage. No racing team carries emotional symbolism quite like Ferrari. For Italy, Ferrari represents national pride. For fans, Ferrari represents passion. For rivals, Ferrari represents pressure. And for drivers, Ferrari represents both dream and burden. Because driving for Ferrari means entering history, but it also means facing unimaginable expectations. Just ask any Formula One driver who wore red. The pressure is relentless. Every mistake becomes global news. Every victory becomes national celebration. That emotional intensity can either elevate drivers or destroy them. And throughout Formula One history, Ferrari experienced both extremes. Some drivers became immortal through Ferrari. Others collapsed under the pressure. Niki Lauda nearly died driving for Ferrari. His horrific crash in 1976 shocked the world. The car burst into flames. Lauda suffered catastrophic injuries. Most people believed his career was finished. But only weeks later he returned to racing. Burned, bandaged, still recovering. That story perfectly reflected Ferrari's image. Pain, determination, defiance. Then there was Gilles Villeneuve, one of the most beloved Ferrari drivers ever. Aggressive, fearless, wildly passionate. Enzo Ferrari adored him. Villeneuve drove with a style that bordered on madness. Fans worshipped him because he represented pure racing emotion. But tragedy struck again in 1982 when Villeneuve died during qualifying. The loss devastated Ferrari. And once again, the company's history became intertwined with heartbreak. That pattern appears repeatedly throughout Ferrari's story. Triumph followed by tragedy. Victory mixed with pain. And perhaps that emotional complexity is exactly why Ferrari became so legendary. Because the brand never felt artificial. His history felt real, messy, human. Unlike perfectly polished corporations, Ferrari carried scars. And strangely, those scars made people connect with the brand even more deeply. Meanwhile, Ferrari road cars continued evolving into symbols of cultural power. The 1980s and 1990s transformed Ferrari into a global celebrity icon. Athletes bought Ferraris. Actors bought Ferraris. Musicians referenced Ferraris in songs. The cars became shorthand for success itself. But Ferrari understood something dangerous about fame. Too much accessibility destroys mystique. So the company remained careful. Production numbers stayed relatively controlled. Marketing remained selective. Ferrari protected desire almost like a priceless resource. And financially, the strategy worked brilliantly. Ferrari became one of the strongest luxury brands in the world. Not because it produced the highest volume, but because it protected emotional value. That distinction matters enormously. Anyone can manufacture products. Very few companies can manufacture mythology. Ferrari mastered mythology. Even the company's color became iconic.
Rosso corsa.
Racing red, a shade instantly associated with Ferrari across the entire world. And that color carries historical significance. In early motorsport, countries were assigned racing colors. British racing green, French blue, German silver, Italian red. Ferrari embraced that red so completely that it eventually became inseparable from the brand itself. Today, if someone asks a child to imagine a sports car, chances are they imagine something red. That's cultural influence at the highest level. And Ferrari's influence extends far beyond automobiles. Fashion brands collaborate with Ferrari. Luxury watch companies partner with Ferrari. Video games feature Ferrari as the ultimate reward vehicle. The company became embedded in global imagination. Yet despite all the prestige, Ferrari still faces criticism. Some enthusiasts argue modern Ferraris became too digital, too comfortable, too refined. Others believe Ferrari continues pushing performance boundaries brilliantly. That debate reveals something fascinating. People care emotionally about Ferrari's identity. When fans criticize Ferrari, it often sounds personal. Because Ferrari represents more than engineering. It represents ideals, rawness, passion, exclusivity, emotion. And whenever the company changes direction, people fear losing those qualities. That's why Ferrari's transition toward hybrid technology created mixed reactions. Some traditionalists hated the idea. Electric assistance? Hybrid systems? To purists, that sounded like betrayal. But Ferrari approached electrification carefully. Not as surrender, as evolution. The company focused on preserving emotional intensity. Performance remained extreme. Driving sensation remained dramatic. Because Ferrari knows silence alone can never replace identity. The soul of Ferrari depends on emotion. And that challenge will define Ferrari's future. Can the company maintain emotional magic in a changing automotive world? That question matters enormously. Because governments worldwide continue pushing stricter emissions regulations. Traditional combustion engines face uncertain futures. Yet Ferrari's identity has always been deeply connected to sound. The scream of a naturally aspirated V12. The violent punch of acceleration. The mechanical drama. Those sensations shaped generations of enthusiasts. Replacing them won't be easy. Still, if history proves anything, it's this. Ferrari survives. Again, and again, and again. War couldn't destroy it. Economic collapse couldn't destroy it. Racing tragedies couldn't destroy it. Corporate rivalries couldn't destroy it. Because Ferrari evolved beyond ordinary business. It became cultural mythology. And mythology operates differently from products. Think about it. Most people will never own a Ferrari. Yet millions still feel emotionally connected to the brand. That's extraordinary. People buy Ferrari posters, wear Ferrari clothing, watch Ferrari races, dream about Ferrari engines. The company successfully sold aspiration itself. And perhaps no Ferrari better symbolizes aspiration than the F50. Overshadowed for years by the F40 and Enzo, the F50 eventually gained legendary status because enthusiasts realized how pure it truly was. Naturally aspirated V12. Formula One-inspired engineering. Open-top driving. No fake drama. Just raw mechanical emotion. Then came the Enzo Ferrari, named after the founder. And naming a car after Enzo himself carried enormous pressure. Couldn't simply be good. It had to feel historic. Ferrari delivered exactly that. Carbon fiber construction.
FH pedal shifting.
insane performance, aggressive futuristic styling. The Enzo became an instant icon. And later, Ferrari raised the stakes again with LaFerrari. Even the naming felt almost arrogant. The Ferrari, as if there could only be one. But arrogance has always been part of Ferrari's DNA. Confidence, drama, intensity, those qualities shaped the brand from the very beginning. And honestly, without them, Ferrari probably wouldn't feel special. Because emotion isn't always rational. Ferrari never tried to be rational. That's why enthusiasts forgive flaws that would destroy other companies. Sometimes Ferraris are difficult, expensive, demanding, temperamental, yet people love them anyway. Actually, sometimes because of those flaws, the cars feel alive. And in an increasingly digital world, people crave experiences that feel alive. That's why Ferrari still matters. Not because it builds transportation, because it builds emotional experiences. And emotionally, Ferrari remains incredibly powerful. Even Ferrari's factory in Maranello became sacred ground for enthusiasts. People travel from across the world just to see where Ferraris are born. The museum, the factory gates, the roads surrounding Maranello. For fans, visiting Ferrari feels almost spiritual. That level of emotional attachment is extremely rare for any company. And perhaps the most fascinating thing about Ferrari is this. The company constantly exists between contradiction, luxury and racing, beauty and danger, tradition and innovation, exclusivity and global fame. Those contradictions create tension, and tension creates fascination. Ferrari never became boring because Ferrari never became emotionally neutral. There's always drama surrounding the brand, always pressure, always expectation, always conversation. Even Ferrari's Formula One strategy mistakes become worldwide headlines. That's the price of legend. When you become iconic, the world watches constantly. And Ferrari has lived under that spotlight for generations. Yet despite everything, despite scandals, rivalries, losses, tragedies, technological revolutions, and changing generations, Ferrari still occupies the throne of automotive mythology. That's astonishing, because maintaining relevance for nearly a century is almost impossible. Entire industries changed, governments changed, technology changed, consumer behavior changed, but Ferrari still makes people stop and stare, still makes hearts race, still creates dreams. And maybe that's because Ferrari represents something timeless. The desire to experience greatness. Not ordinary greatness, extraordinary greatness. The kind that feels emotional, dangerous, beautiful. And deep down, humans will probably always chase that feeling. That's why Ferrari endures. Not merely as a manufacturer, but as a symbol of ambition itself. A reminder that obsession, when pushed to its extreme, can create something immortal. And it all began with one boy attending a race in Italy. One moment, one sound, one obsession. The scream of an engine changed Enzo Ferrari's life forever. And eventually, it changed the entire automotive world. Because long after individual cars disappear, long after drivers retire, long after business leaders are forgotten, the prancing horse still runs, still carrying the spirit of speed, still carrying the spirit of competition, still carrying the impossible dream of a man who refused to compromise. And maybe that's the real reason Ferrari became legendary. Not because the cars were fast, but because Ferrari made people believe speed could become art. And once the world believed that, Ferrari became untouchable. But Ferrari's story becomes even more extraordinary when you realize the company wasn't simply competing against rivals. It was competing against time itself. Because every generation changes. Technology changes. Culture changes. Dreams change. Yet Ferrari somehow remained emotionally relevant decade after decade. That almost never happens. Most luxury brands eventually become predictable. Ferrari never did. And one reason is because Ferrari constantly balanced two opposite worlds, art and engineering. That balance became the secret behind Ferrari's identity. A Ferrari wasn't supposed to feel like a cold machine. It was supposed to feel sculpted, alive. The curves mattered. The stance mattered. The proportions mattered. Ferrari designers understood beauty creates emotion before the engine even starts. That's why many Ferrari models are displayed in museums as works of art, not transportation, art. And few partnerships influenced Ferrari more than Pininfarina. For decades, the legendary Italian design house shaped Ferrari's visual identity. Together, they created some of the most beautiful automotive designs ever seen. The Ferrari 275 GTB, the Dino 246, the 365 GTB/4 Daytona, the F355, machines that looked almost unreal. And what made those cars special wasn't only speed. It was emotional proportion. Ferraris looked dramatic even standing still. Every line felt intentional. Every angle felt emotional. That emotional design philosophy separated Ferrari from many competitors. Because Ferrari never wanted to build appliances. Ferrari wanted to create desire. And desire is emotional. You can measure horsepower. You can measure acceleration. But you cannot easily measure longing. Yet Ferrari mastered it. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Ferrari became deeply embedded in global pop culture. The cars appeared everywhere. Movies, television,
Music videos.
video games.
Celebrity collections.
A Ferrari parked outside a building instantly changed the atmosphere. People stared. Phones came out. Conversations started. Very few brands create that reaction. And Ferrari understood exactly how powerful that reaction was. The company carefully protected its image with military precision. Even small details mattered. The advertisements, the racing uniforms, the dealership architecture, the customer experience. Everything reinforced exclusivity. And exclusivity became one of Ferrari's greatest weapons. But exclusivity can also become dangerous. Because once a brand becomes too elite, it risks disconnecting from ordinary people. Ferrari somehow avoided that trap. Even people who could never afford a Ferrari still loved the brand. Children dreamed about Ferraris. Teenagers covered bedroom walls with Ferrari posters. Gamers raced Ferraris digitally before seeing one in real life. That emotional accessibility kept Ferrari culturally dominant. The company represented aspiration. And aspiration doesn't require ownership. It requires imagination. That's why Ferrari became larger than the automotive industry itself. It entered human imagination. And perhaps no decade demonstrated Ferrari's cultural dominance better than the 1980s. The world became obsessed with excess, luxury, speed, status, and Ferrari fit perfectly into that environment. The Testarossa became a global icon. Its side strakes looked futuristic. Its proportions looked outrageous. Its presence looked intimidating. The car didn't quietly exist. It demanded attention. And attention became part of Ferrari culture. Because Ferrari owners often wanted the emotional experience of being seen. That's an uncomfortable truth some people avoid admitting. Ferrari ownership has always involved performance beyond driving. Social performance. The arrival. The engine start. The reactions. Ferrari understood those emotions deeply. And instead of ignoring them, the company embraced them. That's why Ferrari experiences feel theatrical. Even modern Ferrari launch events resemble grand performances. Dramatic lighting, powerful music, emotional speeches. Ferrari doesn't unveil cars. Ferrari unveils dreams. And that theatrical identity traces directly back to Enzo Ferrari himself. Because Enzo understood storytelling. Even if he rarely expressed emotion publicly, he understood mythology instinctively. The racing victories, the rivalries, the heroic drivers, the dramatic losses. all of it strengthened Ferrari's legend. And Ferrari's rivalries became legendary themselves. Ford versus Ferrari became one of the greatest battles in motorsport history. But Ferrari versus Lamborghini carried a completely different energy. Personal insult.
Ego. Pride.
The story became automotive folklore. Ferruccio Lamborghini complained about Ferrari reliability. Enzo dismissed him. Lamborghini created a rival empire. And suddenly Italy had two automotive titans representing completely different philosophies. Ferrari represented racing heritage. Lamborghini represented rebellion. Ferrari felt disciplined. Lamborghini felt outrageous. And that rivalry elevated both companies. Because competition creates innovation. The Countach shocked the world. Ferrari responded. Lamborghini evolved. Ferrari evolved. The supercar era exploded. And enthusiasts benefited from all of it. Then came Porsche. A completely different kind of rival. German precision versus Italian passion. Porsche built a reputation for engineering efficiency. Ferrari built a reputation for emotional intensity. And the debates never stopped. Which philosophy was better? The reliability and precision of Porsche? Or the raw emotional drama of Ferrari? Even today, enthusiasts argue endlessly. And those arguments actually help Ferrari. Because discussion keeps mythology alive. People rarely passionately debate forgettable brands. They debate icons. And Ferrari became one of the greatest icons ever created. Meanwhile, Ferrari's Formula One journey continued through triumph and heartbreak. After Schumacher's dominant era ended, Ferrari entered another difficult period. Championship near misses, strategic mistakes, political controversies. And yet Ferrari remained central to Formula One identity. Many fans openly admit something fascinating. Formula One without Ferrari feels incomplete. That statement reveals how deeply Ferrari became woven into the sport itself. Ferrari isn't merely another competitor. Ferrari became part of Formula One mythology. And every season carries emotional weight because expectations remain enormous. The Tifosi continue hoping. Every year, every race. That loyalty demonstrates Ferrari's emotional power more clearly than any marketing campaign ever could. Because loyalty built through emotion survives disappointment. And Ferrari fans experienced plenty of disappointment. But they stayed. Because supporting Ferrari often feels less like logic and more like identity. And identity creates powerful emotional bonds. At the same time, Ferrari road cars entered increasingly extreme territory. The company pushed performance boundaries relentlessly. The 458 Italia became one of the most celebrated modern Ferraris ever built. Its naturally aspirated V8 screamed with almost musical intensity. Drivers described the experience emotionally. Alive, addictive, visceral. Then Ferrari replaced it with the turbocharged 488 GTB. And suddenly enthusiasts worried. Would turbocharging destroy Ferrari emotion? Again, the same fear emerged. Technology versus soul. But Ferrari adapted. The 488 proved brutally fast. Different from the 458. But still unmistakably Ferrari. That adaptability became one of Ferrari's hidden strengths. The company evolves without completely abandoning identity. A difficult balance. And perhaps the most difficult challenge arrived with SUVs. For decades, Ferrari resisted the idea. Purists insisted Ferrari should never build one. Then Ferrari revealed the Purosang. And predictably, controversy exploded. Some enthusiasts called it betrayal. Others called it brilliant business. But the fascinating part is this. Even controversy strengthened Ferrari visibility. Because Ferrari understands modern attention economics. If the world debates your decisions passionately, your brand remains culturally powerful. And Ferrari remains incredibly powerful. Financially, Ferrari transformed into one of the most successful luxury companies on earth. Its profit margins became astonishing. Again, not through massive production, through controlled exclusivity. Ferrari learned that scarcity preserves prestige, and preserving prestige preserves emotional value. That strategy influenced countless luxury brands afterward. But Ferrari executed it with unusual discipline. Even now, certain Ferrari models become available only to carefully selected customers. History with the brand matters. Relationships matter. Loyalty matters. That creates frustration. But it also creates desire. And desire drives Ferrari's entire ecosystem. Collectors compete for allocations. Owners maintain relationships. Auction prices climb higher. The mythology feeds itself. And nowhere is Ferrari mythology more visible than auctions. When rare Ferraris appear for sale, the entire collector world pays attention. The numbers become absurd. Tens of millions. Sometimes more. Yet people still bid. Why? Because rare Ferraris represent more than transportation. They represent historical significance. Owning a rare Ferrari feels like owning a piece of automotive history itself, especially cars connected to racing heritage. Because Ferrari's racing DNA dramatically increases emotional value. The connection between road cars and motorsport remains essential. Ferrari never wanted those worlds separated. The company wanted customers to feel racing influence everywhere. The steering, the aerodynamics, the engineering philosophy, even the sound. And Ferrari engineers became obsessed with sound. Not noise, sound. They tuned engines almost like musical instruments. Because Ferrari understood something unusual. The ear influences emotion just as much as the eyes. That's why certain Ferraris sound unforgettable. The high-revving V12s, the sharp V8 screams. Those sounds trigger emotional responses instantly. And emotionally memorable experiences create lifelong attachment. That emotional attachment explains why many Ferrari owners become repeat customers. A Ferrari experience can become addictive, not merely because of speed, because of feeling, the anticipation before driving, the smell of leather and fuel, the vibration of the engine, the reaction from strangers. Ferrari ownership becomes emotional theater. And throughout all of this, Enzo Ferrari's shadow still looms over the company, even decades after his death. Because Enzo didn't simply create a manufacturer. He created a philosophy, an uncompromising belief that emotion matters, that racing matters, that greatness requires obsession. And obsession became Ferrari culture. Employees speak about Ferrari differently from ordinary corporations. There's pride, pressure, expectation. Working for Ferrari means carrying history. That history can inspire, but it can also become heavy, because every Ferrari product launch gets compared against nearly a century of legendary machines. Every Formula One season gets compared against Schumacher dominance. Every new CEO gets compared against the company's mythology. That pressure never disappears. Yet perhaps pressure itself became part of Ferrari's fuel. The company performs best when challenged. And challenge shaped Ferrari from the beginning. Without challenge, maybe Ferrari never becomes legendary. Think about it. Without Alfa Romeo rejecting Enzo Ferrari, Ferrari might never exist. Without Ford rivalry, Ferrari mythology might never explode globally. Without Lamborghini competition, the supercar wars might feel less emotional. Conflict repeatedly strengthened Ferrari identity. And maybe that's why Ferrari stories feel cinematic. Because they contain every emotional ingredient. Ambition, rivalry,
Pride.
tragedy, victory, loss, obsession. Ferrari's history doesn't feel manufactured. It feels dramatic, almost too dramatic to be real. Yet it is real. And that reality makes Ferrari endlessly fascinating. Even modern younger audiences who know little about motorsport still recognize Ferrari instantly. That level of recognition is rare. Ferrari achieved what brands dream about.
Universal Symbolism.
The prancing horse became shorthand for excellence. For speed, for luxury, for ambition, and perhaps most importantly, for dreaming big. Because Ferrari has always represented impossible dreams becoming reality. A poor boy from Medina obsessed over racing. That obsession created one of the most legendary companies in history. That story resonates beyond cars. It speaks to human ambition itself. The idea that obsession, when combined with vision and relentless determination, can create immortality. And Ferrari truly achieved immortality. Not literal immortality, cultural immortality. The kind where generations continue repeating the name. The kind where symbols survive longer than people. The kind where history transforms into legend. That's Ferrari. Not just an automotive company. A global legend built from passion, speed, conflict, beauty, sacrifice, and obsession. And after nearly a century, the story still isn't finished. Because somewhere tonight, another child will hear a Ferrari engine for the first time. And just like Enzo Ferrari all those years ago, something inside them will change forever.